What really happens when you're faced with the emotional task of emptying a childhood home? In today's episode, we're joined by Alison Binney, who has captured the complexity of this experience in her recent written poetry collection, The Opposite of Swedish Death Cleaning. Alison shares what it was like to clear her father's house with her brother while he was in a care home living with dementia. It's a journey filled with memories, loss, laughter, and reflection. And we'll talk about her decluttering journey and how her book with poetry came about.
You're listening to the Declutter Hub podcast, bringing you tried and tested, no-nonsense tips and advice from the leading experts in decluttering and organising your home. Now here are your hosts, Ingrid Jansen and Lesley Spellman.
Hello and welcome, listeners. I'm Ingrid.
And I'm Lesley. Now, if you're here for the very first time today, or you've been listening in for ages, we want to say a huge thank you. And we have a little favour to ask.
If you like what you hear, be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button, share us with your friends, or leave us a review. It makes a huge difference to us. Hi, Alison. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Well, it's a bit interesting how our worlds have aligned, right? Because I think you heard us on Women's Hour, the radio show that Lesley and I were invited to as guests.
Yeah.
And then a little while later, I got an email from you saying, I listened to you on Women's Hour. I think we should, can we have a conversation about my book? And I was intrigued because your book is with poems, and that's not really my thing, but it intrigued me because of the title. What's the title, Alison?
So the title is The Opposite of Swedish Death Cleaning.
Yeah.
And your Woman's Hour podcast really appealed to me because my book had just been published. So
Yeah.
the whole idea of decluttering was on my radar. And then I would say that until I had to sort and clear my dad's house, I wasn't really a decluttering person. So I feel like our worlds have aligned in a really weird way. So yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. You reached out, we had a chat, and I said to Lesley, we need to get Alison on the podcast because she's got so much, so many good things to share with us. So my idea is, Alison, that before the break, we'll kind of talk about your whole decluttering journey and what happened with your dad's house.
Yeah.
But definitely, would love for our listeners to hear two of the poems that were in the book and that really resonated with me as well. So we'll do that after the break. So tell us a bit more, kind of what happened? Why are you suddenly in the decluttering realm?
Sure. So my journey with this started exactly 3 years ago, almost to the day. So July 2022. So my dad had started to develop dementia kind of just before the pandemic. And then I think the pandemic was really unhelpful for that because he lost his kind of routine and his social contact with people. So the development of his dementia was a bit faster through the pandemic, to the point where by the autumn of 2021, we began to worry. My brother and I began to worry, was he safe in his own home? And then in the spring of 2022, he went into hospital and we realized, it's really not safe for Dad to be in his own house anymore. He lived on his own. So he lived in a 4-bedroom house, which was our family home. And my mum had died in 2004. So he'd lived there on his own for all that time. And then it took a while to find the right care home for him, but he moved into a care home in early May of 2022. And then my brother and I realized that we needed to sell his house to pay for the care home fees. And suddenly we looked around at the house and we were like, it's our responsibility to sort and clear this. But we felt that we couldn't start straight away because it was quite emotional, him moving into the care home. And I guess although we knew that it was very final to move there, it felt a bit disrespectful to straight away kind of tidy up his house. So I think we left it for a couple of months so that he could come back. And then when it was really clear that he wasn't going to, there was just a day in July when I thought I need to start on clearing his house. My dad was like, in some ways, a very tidy person and a man of routine. But
Mhm.
I know from your podcast, you've used the phrase clutter blindness.
Mhm.
And I think he had that. And I think we had that because it was only when he was out of the house that we noticed how much stuff there was. So the lounge was fairly tidy, but I opened the garage door and literally it was floor to ceiling cardboard boxes. So I think since my mum had died, he hadn't thrown away a single piece of cardboard. So every Amazon box, every wrapping paper inside, he just chucked it in the garage, along with paint pots, rolls of carpet, rolls of wallpaper. So there's just stuff there. My mum had died, as I said, years before, and there were parts of the house that were very much hers that my dad hadn't touched since she died. So she had the smallest room was a sewing room. All her sewing stuff was still in there exactly as she'd left it. And then the kitchen, because my mum had been like the main cook in the house, my dad had coped well on his own, but he would never like bake or use spices and so on. So literally like a spice rack where the sell by date on the spices was in the 1990s, and
Yeah. Yeah.
this was 2022, and all her sugar and flour and all of that in tubs. So it was completely overwhelming. And I know your podcast helps people to declutter their own houses, but it's really different when it's not your house.
Yeah.
And then there was
Well,
the
it
yeah,
is kind of your house because it was your
yeah.
childhood home, but it isn't,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And you feel like, because it's your parents' house, you feel sometimes still like a child, like, am I allowed to go through this stuff?
Hmm.
I was about 50 at the time, but I felt like it was the most grown-up thing I ever did, was to kind of
Mm.
do that transition from childhood into adulthood by actually clearing my dad's house. And
Hmm.
because he had dementia and so his memory had gone so much, my brother and I were both on the same page, and we both decided that we couldn't tell him what we were doing with his house because
Yeah.
it would have really upset him.
Yeah.
Then he would have forgotten, and then
Yeah.
it would have not been kind. So
Yeah.
that felt strange because so I live about 60 miles away from my dad's house. So I would
Hmm.
go over to the house, spend hours sorting and clearing it. Then I'd go and visit my dad and just talk about the weather or the garden.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to tell him what I
Yeah.
had just been doing. So that
Yeah.
was really weird. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you only, I assuming he could only take a very small amount of his belongings with him to the care home,
That's
right?
right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
did
Yeah.
you help him choose the things, or did you kind of know which were the super
Yeah.
important things for him?
That's a good question. So, it was a smallish room that he moved into, but we thought about the pictures to put on the walls. So there was a
Hmm.
painting of Ely Cathedral that we knew he really liked, so we
Yeah.
moved that with him. And then we thought it was important for him to have photographs, particularly
Yeah.
still photographs of my mum, to keep the
Hmm.
memory of her still alive.
Yeah.
And then just kind of like small objects, that he could still hold and touch. And
Yeah.
so it was like a very small scale version of his house that we
Yeah.
put to his room. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Interesting. So you kind of then already did almost like the best of the best
Yeah.
went with
For him.
him,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you kind of knew that's the right thing for him to
Yeah.
have. But of course, you can't fit a four-bedroom house in a
No,
care home, and
no, no.
everybody realizes that. But then
Yeah.
you were left indeed with
Yeah.
the rest of the house.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was the most overwhelming experience I've ever had. And I think
Hmm.
that's one of my motivations to come on the podcast, is because I know that this is not an uncommon experience.
Yeah.
And it was so daunting. And what I want to share with people is that it was okay. Like, it took 8 months, partly because I don't live there. So I had to keep traveling back and forth. It took eight
Yeah.
months. But I'm really glad that we did it. And and I learned so much along the way. So I think uh, I started with the garage initially because I thought that's the least sentimental part of the house, and it was
Hmm.
easy in a way to rip up cardboard boxes and so on. But after several hours, I'd hardly made a dent in it at all. Then there were other bits of the house, like the kitchen, which I think in your own house, the kitchen can is not particularly sentimental. Maybe in my parents' house, the kitchen was my mum's part of the house. So
Hmm.
I really had to be in the right mood to do that, and to to open jars of things that she was the last person to close
Mm-hmm.
nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So what I kind of realized was that there were different kind of jobs to do in his house. Some were very practical, like flattening boxes. Some were very sentimental. Some were very business-like, like going through my dad's admin. And I had to feel in the right mood on a particular day. So one day I might feel like, yes, I can face my mum's kitchen today, and I needed to
Mm-hmm.
do it when I was in that mood. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Another day I would have loads of physical energy and I would just do loads of trips to the tip with cardboard, you know. So
Yeah.
I guess a thing I learned was there's different kinds of energy and there's different kinds of jobs that you can face. And if you
Yeah.
don't feel like you can face one job on a particular day, it's okay because there'll be another day when that will be exactly the thing that you can do. So,
Yeah.
like you, I know you're very good at kind of breaking stuff down for people into steps. It's the same. Like I,
Yeah.
I couldn't look at it as a massive whole. I had to look at it bit by bit, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes complete sense. And all this time, was it just you and your brother, or did you employ some a skip, or did you have some men
Yeah.
help you drag stuff out,
Good
or did you,
question.
how did you do it all?
Yeah. So mostly it was just us and our partners. But my brother and I, although we're really different in personality and in interest, when it came to my dad or his house, we were very on the same page, but
Yeah.
also uh, complemented each other. So my brother wasn't really interested in the sentimental things or the bits that I was really curious about, like what is in my dad's study, what is in the filing cabinet. My brother wasn't really interested, but he was very good at like finishing off the garage and finding out like where can we take the empty pots of paint and the chemicals and stuff. So we worked as a team really well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we employed a clearance company right at the very end. So I think the process was us spending the time like working out like what do we either need to go through and keep for ourselves or know that's there and photograph or rehome and sort
Hmm.
that. And then meanwhile, we were sort of like noticing what's the stuff that just needs to go, but that we
Hmm.
need to get clearance people to do. So,
Yeah.
so we started in July. I think the clearance people then came early March. And by that time, I felt really confident that the clearance people could come and there would be nothing they would get rid of that I cared about.
Yeah.
So then the clearance people then brought the skip, and then and I met the clearance people, and then I got out because I thought I don't want to see things that like part of the literally the furniture of my parents' house, their bed. I don't want to see that in a skip. You know,
Yeah.
it's too hard. So
Yeah.
I left them to it, and then after they had finished, and then they took the remaining things to an auction. So that was the process I didn't understand until it happened, but they worked out what could be auctioned off, and then they
Yeah.
took it to a local auction, and then they got in touch with an itemized list of like how much things had fetched, and then it turned out that there was the cost of the clearance, but actually we made a small profit on the things that had sold at auction. Um,
Okay.
and then about a week after that, I just had this like burning desire to go back into the house because I needed to see it empty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was worried, like, is that going to feel like awful to see it empty? And it was incredible because I would say that it wasn't empty. It was a spring day, it was April, it was full of sunlight, and it was like full of potential. It was like this house is ready for like the next chapter. And
Yeah.
I felt like because it had taken us so long and because we'd done a careful job, I could let go of the house at that point.
Hmm. 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 I've got goosebumps. I
Oh,
love that. I love that.
yeah.
It's like ready for a new
Yeah,
chapter.
yeah,
And I
definitely.
think that's fantastic. And that you had such a good collaboration with your brother as
Yeah,
well, and that
yeah,
you were able to take the time. That's of
yeah,
course, I think the main thing. The time was
yeah,
on your side here. I know the house had to be sold,
yeah.
but it didn't have to all be done in 4 weeks flat.
Exactly. Yeah, that would have been hard. And I'm a teacher, so I can't take time off outside of school holidays.
Mm-mm.
So I had to
Yeah,
do it at those times.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And then
exactly.
I think uh, a couple of other things that I learned was, so we had to be really selective about what we kept because my dad had this 4-bedroom house. I have a 2-bedroom flat. You know, my brother has a small house. So I learned that maxim about quality over quantity, and like choosing just the small things that would sum up a lot rather than filling up the house with things. And
Yeah.
sometimes I knew, like, sometimes I would know a thing that I really wanted. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I would think that there was something I really needed to keep. And then I'd get it back to my house. And in my house, it didn't mean anything. And then
No.
I'd live with it for a week. And then I'd be like, I don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
But I photographed. I think another tip is I took photos of so many things that we didn't keep. Then I feel like I've got them, but not in a
Yeah.
way that takes
Yeah.
up space. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what are a few of the things that you kept that were important to you? I'm
Yeah.
interested in that.
So, a few of my mum's kitchen things, which is lovely because they're things that I then use. I've got one here. This is my mum's tablespoon, you know, and
Yeah.
she was such a cook. And it's like, so then I'm cooking with her cooking things. One of the poems in the collection is about spices, because I just, looking at my mum's spice rack was such a memory of cooking with her. And some of them were just old, you know, ordinary jars, but she had these Cornish spice jars that were, I know, were a
Oh,
wedding present.
wonderful.
So then they are my spice jars now, and that's just a really lovely thing. My parents were both teachers, and I'm a teacher. So actually, when I found their chalk, you know, because they were teaching in the era of chalk, it was lovely. So
Yeah.
this was my mum's chalk tin, and inside like the sticks of chalk, which I wrote
Oh, yeah.
about.
Yeah.
And I love that, like the smallest one, you know, she's, because she was so thrifty, she's worn it right down to the um, so it was just, it wasn't even things that are particularly valuable, but it was
Hmm.
things that they touched and handled, I think, that really mattered to me.
Yeah.
And being selective, so my grandma was a great letter writer. I found a lot of her letters, but I decided to keep one. And it's not even the like a significant letter. It's not even about like some massive thing. It was the most ordinary letter, but I felt like that one letter, it summed up everything about my grandma and how she would write. I didn't need 100 because
Yeah.
I would never have looked at 100.
Did you read them all to decide which one you kept?
I didn't have time. Well, I skimmed them, and then
Okay.
I did. But there are other things, and I think this is my other kind of key learning from it was
Hmm.
the things that are really sentimental. We did actually get a storage unit, which is in a farmer's field in Norfolk. It's a shipping container. And because I felt like there were so many decisions that we were having to make about the house and the stuff, it was like decision fatigue. And when there were things that we really felt this has a lot of sentimental value, like loads of photos, but we just didn't have the time or the headspace to sort them, we
Hmm.
have put them in that storage for now,
Yeah.
just to delay that decision making. And one day we will have to then go to the storage and make
Yeah.
those decisions. But it wasn't the right time to do
Yeah.
all of that. So that's the
Yeah.
final stage of the process, I think.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So some of the mainly sentimental items
Yeah.
that exactly what you're describing, it was just too much because you had to
Yeah.
bring this house over the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
you've kind of found, but I'm assuming if it's photographs, it's not because there's no massive amount of furniture. It's not a
Yeah.
massive unit, is it?
No, it's
It's
small. Yeah,
yeah.
it's really small. And it's things like, well, I think of it like, you know, when I don't know if you do this, if you put leftovers in the fridge and then they sit there for a bit and then you don't end up eating them. But you sort of, they have to sit there a bit and you know then if you want to eat them or not. I
Yeah.
feel like if there's stuff, if when we go to the storage, there's stuff that we can't even remember is in there,
Yeah.
then we don't need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it just delayed some of the most difficult decisions.
Yeah.
That helped us. And also I think there may be things in there where for my brother and I, we might need to kind of have a discussion about who has
Yeah.
it, you know, it
Yeah.
delayed that as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So is your father still in the care home?
He is in the care home, yeah. And he does still remember my brother and I, which is really nice.
Yeah.
He doesn't speak very much anymore, but he
Yeah.
really likes it when I read to him. So that's
Yeah.
really nice. And one of the things I do is I take some of the children's books from the house that he read to me, and I read them to him in the care home. So
Okay.
that's another nice link. So
Yeah, definitely. Speaking about reading, a great way to have a little break, because after the break, I would love to hear more about the poetry book that you
Right.
wrote. So let's have a short break and we'll be right back. Hello, listeners. Welcome back. Well, I don't know how about you, but I've been absolutely like hanging on every word Alison has been telling us so far, and I hope you're enjoying this podcast too. But as we mentioned at the start, Alison wrote a poetry book about her whole experience, and it's called The Opposite of Swedish Death Cleaning, which is what I find fascinating. Why did you decide on that title, Alison, first of all?
It goes back to that day 3 years ago in July 2022, because I took a tea break from sorting my dad's garage and I
Mm-hmm.
Googled advice for clearing a parent's home.
Mm-hmm.
I was just time wasting, really. And I was also thinking, can somebody help me with this?
Yeah.
And when I Googled, I found loads of useless things. And I found amongst the articles an article about Swedish death cleaning, which I know you've done podcasts about.
Yeah.
The idea that in middle age, maybe about my age, you go through your own stuff and downsize. And I read this and I was thinking, Dad, why did you not do this? Because if he had done it, 30 years ago when he was fit and well, I wouldn't have had to do it. And I had this idea in my head of a Swedish woman whose dad had Swedish death cleaned, and then she would go into his house and it would be so empty and it would be dead easy. And I was so envious of this imaginary woman. And then I started to think of a poem about it. And then as I sorted and cleared his house over 8 months, I actually realized that I didn't envy her at all, because it actually would have been really quite sterile and clinical to go into his house and it was empty. It was so valuable for me to have that journey of going through his things.
Mm-hmm.
It was the opposite of Swedish death cleaning, which is what I called the poem and then the book. But I think it was one of the most healing things that I've ever done, particularly in
Mm.
the relationship with my mum, who had died all those years ago. My
Yeah.
dad had not particularly talked about her after she died, but it was a real way that I connected with her. Um,
Yeah.
so it became the title of the collection. And actually, on the front of the book cover, my friend Kate, who did the cover, has made this collage out of some of the objects from my dad's house, which is another really nice way of capturing them. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Well, I would love for you to read Swedish Death Cleaning, the poem for
sure.
us. So
Yeah.
you've got the floor.
Okay, thank you. The opposite of Swedish death cleaning. Lately, I conjure a woman in Stockholm opening her father's front door into laminate light, the scent of lemons. Crossing the hall to his study, she finds the folder marked Dodd in an otherwise empty desk and heads for the kitchen. One chair, one mug, one teaspoon, one coffee filter left. I want an antonym for dostagning these days, for we are not Swedish, and this is messy. You in the home not yet dead, me frisking your house for ladybird books and egg cups, stamp albums, paperweights and pebbles, for 50 nubs of imperial leather soap. My Swedish double rinses her father's mug, leaves it to drain while she makes a few calls, then slips it into her bag. Perhaps it will hold her toothbrush. Perhaps on the train home, a line from a bedtime poem will hum for a moment, then mumble itself to sleep. Can I just say about the imperial leather soap that I mentioned
Yes,
there,
I would
which is
love.
it appears on the in the middle of the cover. So one of the things that I discovered in my dad's house, and it's one of the ways in which he was tidy and a hoarder, is that under his bathroom sink he had a plastic, like a Tupperware tub, and it had like about 50 of these imperial leather soap ends in. Every time he'd got to the end of a soap, he'd just stuck it in the box. And I don't know what he ever thought he was going to do with them, but it was just a random thing. But I kept one of them because it just smells of him, and it's just a
Yeah,
really nice. Again, it's a small thing, but it's a way of keeping the
yeah,
memory of him. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. Had you ever considered helping your dad sort more stuff out in his house after your mum had
Huge
passed away?
question. Yeah. So in the first few months after my mum died, the two things that he did want to sort were her books and her clothes. And we did her clothes together actually.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really important thing to do together, I think.
Yeah.
It was a kind of a stage of his grief, I think, to sort through those things and take them to the charity shop. And I think I thought at the time that was the beginning of a process that might then
Mm-hmm.
lead to the kitchen or the sewing room, but it stopped. And actually, I sort of didn't mind then because I think maybe we all liked that her sewing room was just the same. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it was important to have that part of the house that was her. And then we just sort of lived with it. And then it was that kind of clutter blindness that I really like that phrase. And then I think maybe 10 years ago at one point I might have thought, gosh, one day there's going to be a lot to
Mm-hmm.
do in this house. But I also know that my dad was so methodical that doing it with him, it would have been very slow. Because
Mm-hmm.
and he wouldn't have wanted to get rid of anything. We would have had a conversation about everything in the house, and he would have found a reason to keep everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
older he got, the more it would have been like that. So in a way, doing it without him was actually easier, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing so much with us, Alison, because I think so many people will resonate with what you're sharing with us. Now, the sewing room keeps coming up,
yeah,
Alison. What
yeah.
was it about the sewing room?
It was just so my mum. And one of the uncanny things was that she had one of those like tailor's dummies in there. So
Yeah.
that when she was, a lot of the outfits she made were for herself. So she had early retirement because of ill health, because she had cancer, but she was a magistrate for a couple of years. She needed some suits and she made herself some suits. It was a cheap way of doing it. She was really good at it. And so this tailor's dummy was her exact dimensions. But
Hmm.
what it meant was you could walk in the room and almost feel like out of the corner of your eye that was her. Um,
Yeah.
so that was kind of weird, but also nice. And then there was so she had this huge chocolate box. It was like the biggest milk tray empty chocolate box you could imagine. But in each indentation, there were sewing threads for embroidery in beautiful colors. And
Hmm.
she told me once that she had that because she remembered as a child playing on her granny's bed with her granny's sewing box that was in an empty chocolate box. And she'd always wanted that, and there was her button box and then loads of material and cuddly toys that she often made for like her grandchild or friends' children or whatever. Um, but the thing is that I wish I could sew and knit, but I don't. I learned a little bit as a child. I haven't stuck at it. There was a part of me that wanted to go, I'll just take all of it and I'll learn how to sew and I'll take a sewing machine.
Hmm.
But I'm a busy teacher and realistically, I'm not going to do that at least
Yeah.
until I retire. And that's a long way off and I don't have space for it. So we had to let go of it, but
Yeah.
we had to go to the right home. And it so happened that one of my friends had a teenage daughter and she told me that her teenage daughter was doing this project, this extended project in the sixth form on dressmaking. She was making like a replica 18th century outfit. She loved embroidery and everything. And I just thought that has to be where this stuff goes. So
Yeah.
we packed it up, put it in my friend's boot, took it back. And it's lovely because this friend's daughter is studying maths at university, which was my mum's subject, so
Oh,
I know they would have got on. And
yeah.
occasionally my friend sends me a picture of something that Erin has made with my mum's sewing things. So I
Hmm.
know they've gone to the best home and they've got a new life. And I know
Yeah.
that's what my mum would want. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think sometimes you have to take time finding the right home for things.
Yeah.
Then you can let go of other stuff if you've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It sounds to me that you really try to give a lot to donation,
yeah,
bring stuff to the recycling center, give stuff to the right people. And
yeah,
that's why it took you 8 months, right?
yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's not just, right, let's pull up a big container outside and chuck
No,
everything away. I think it was really important. It sounds to me for you both
yeah,
that things went to the right places. And
yeah, yeah,
sometimes the right place is not immediately obvious. And
yeah,
something kind of has to happen, and then you go, oh wow, yeah, this is like the perfect
Exactly.
place.
Yeah. I discovered my friend's son was into coin collecting and my dad had an old coin collection. So that's gone
Yeah,
to him, you know.
yeah,
But you can't do that with everything.
no,
But you feel like if you do that with selective things, then you can let go of other
yeah,
things. So,
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, Now, I would love for you to read another poem from your book, because one really, and I have to say again, listeners, I am not a poetry person at all, but Alison kindly sent me her book so I could kind of look through it. And there was one that just stood out to me, which is called The Hard Miles. So,
mhm.
Alison, please, if you won't mind,
Sure.
can you read it to us?
Yeah. And before I read it, I'll say I initially wrote this poem after going for a run that was a really difficult run, and I was thinking of all the ways running can be challenging. But since the poem was published, people have told me they think it's about all kinds of other things. So I
Mm,
think you can interpret this poem however you want. But
yeah.
it's called The Hard Miles. The first miles, the fast miles, the lost miles, the last miles, the cobbly miles, the hobbly miles, the wobbly after the flu miles, the dog shit miles, the dog tired miles, the dog leg miles, the dead leg miles, the hungry miles, the hungover miles, the too soon after tea miles, the hiccuping miles, the trapped wind miles, the really needing a wee miles, the old shoe miles, the new shoe miles, the stone in the shoe for miles, miles, the itchy miles, the stitchy miles, the sniffly sodden tissue miles, the odd sock miles, the wet sock miles, the sweaty miles, the sweary miles, the steep miles, the deep heat miles, the footsteps just behind miles, the nobody else for miles, miles, the not getting any younger miles, the not getting any faster miles, the extra miles, the ultra miles, the millions miles away miles, the several miles behind miles, the miles to go before you sleep, the miles to go before you sleep, the journey of 1,000 miles, the grit of the single stride.
I think it's wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think it's honestly wonderful. And it reminds me so much of so many of people who are in our communities and who are struggling with
Mm,
decluttering and who find it so hard, and who
yeah,
see that road in front of them with all the
yeah,
miles to go. They
yeah, yeah,
see that journey in front of them, and they look back and they see all the hard miles they've already done.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's just, I
yeah.
just think it's wonderful.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's really kind. Thank you.
yeah,
I do feel like that is my motivation to talk about it. And when I talk about it, everyone has a story. Everyone has
yeah.
a story about a parent's house, or they're thinking about their own stuff and what's going to happen, you know. And but I think what you do that's so powerful is you make it into a community thing. And
Mm,
for me, it's the same when I share poems and people tell me about their stories.
yeah.
When you connect with people about it, then you're not on your own with that stuff.
Exactly,
So, yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And I think I hadn't realized that this poem was about running when I read it. I really thought it was about your journey going through your father's house. And
yeah,
it just hit me so much. I thought,
yeah,
wow, people who are feeling so overwhelmed, it must feel like that. And
yeah,
how
yeah,
can you look at it from a different point of
yeah.
view?
And I think, although in the poetry book, not all the poems are actually about clearing the house, in a way,
Hmm.
all the poems are about it because I
Yeah,
couldn't think about anything else. So I
yeah,
think, yes, I was on a run and I was thinking about that, but I was carrying the weight of my dad's house and all of that.
yeah,
So no
yeah,
wonder the poems,
yeah,
even about other things, kind of become, everything is interlinked and everything
yeah,
becomes about
yeah,
that. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I think it is now knowing how hard it is to write a book. I applaud you, Alison, for writing a book.
Thank
I mean,
you.
you are an English teacher, so writing must be something that you enjoy. But poetry is not easy. But you've made it, and it's a wonderful book, and we'll definitely. So, it's called The Opposite of Swedish Death Cleaning. We'll definitely put a link in the show notes for anybody who's interested. Um, I've honestly loved recording this podcast with you. It's been
Oh, thank you.
so interesting. And I really hope, listeners, that mainly Alison's main message of you can do it.
Yeah.
You just have to break this down and see it for what it is and take it one bite at a time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I realized as well, I think one of the things is that you live in all these different time periods when you're doing it.
Mm,
Like you're living in your own past, your parents' past, your grandparents' past. You're living in your future because you're thinking about your mortality. That's exhausting. So
yeah,
you have to be kind to yourself, and you
yeah,
have to take it step by step, and you have to have treats, I think, rewards
mm,
for like
yeah,
each little thing that you do.
yeah. So what were your rewards? Because we know it was only a few little bits of stuff. So
Yeah.
how did you take time in those 8 months to occasionally go, guys, I just can't, I need to have a day
Yeah.
off?
Yeah. So sometimes what would happen was so my partner would come with me and we would do like 2 days in the house and then
Yeah,
we would drive to the Norfolk coast and have like
yeah,
a couple of days by the sea. And that
yeah,
was just so nice. And we've really felt like we had earned it by
yeah,
doing that. Sometimes it was so I would usually I would get the train when I was going to my dad's house and then I would use his car at that end. And I found the train journey back was like a buffer. And sometimes I'd just get a nice drink and have a drink on the train. And that was just like my way of decompressing after doing it, you know. So
yeah,
yeah, it could be a very small treat, but it really helps, I think.
yeah, yeah. So of course the main question is, did the house sell after all that
Yes.
hard work?
It did, and I really felt very happy because when you care about a house, you want it to find the right home,
Yeah,
and the lovely couple who bought it then have sent a couple of cards when they've forwarded post on, and they've been so appreciative of the house, and I really feel
mm,
like they've given it this new life. So, but I
yeah,
also know that I will never want to go past that house again. Like I don't
yeah,
want to see it because it's theirs now. So
yeah,
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 we've moved
yeah.
on. Yeah.
Right. It's a full circle in the
Yeah,
end,
it really is.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Alison, thank you so much for being here on the
Okay.
show. Thank you for reaching out. It's been an
Mm.
absolute pleasure. And it's been wonderful to talk to you about listeners. Um, have you had to declutter loved ones' belongings? Or are you like thinking to yourself after listening, oh, this is going to be me soon? And has this podcast helped you at least to get a bit of clarity that it's not something that you have to dread, that you have to kind of go, oh no, maybe you do need help. Maybe you do need to do it in a different way. There's no right or wrong way. This way worked for Alison, but we hope that her journey and her story has inspired you to look ahead. And maybe you have realized now, okay, I might need to do a little bit of decluttering with my mom or dad before they reach that stage. Maybe they are ready.
Mm.
There's no right or wrong way again, but have those conversations because I think that's really important. Alison, thank you again for being on the show.
Mm. Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely to chat, so thank you.
Been a pleasure. Listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for listening to the Declutter Hub podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your podcast player so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.